Everybody needs to make a living, right? And none of us have all the answers, not even the people at the top, right? Like, let's remember to be humble as leaders. Make spaces for people to experiment, to explore, to share what didn't work and share what worked, right? Because Thomas Edison came up with how many ideas before he finally made the light bulb work, right? What doesn't work is just as important as figuring out what works, right? It's that journey that gets there.
AI isn't the future, it's now. And whether you're in HR, sales, operations, or leadership, the choices you make today will determine whether you thrive or get left behind. Today on AI Voice of Victim, we're bringing together two sharp minds who are shaping what it really means to move AI forward. Angela Liu is the founder and CEO of Ikaru Consulting, where she helps businesses scale with strategy, clarity, and compassion. We also have Tom Simon from Walk West, our growth architect here. I work with him every day. He's focused on AI, automation, and helping organizations create efficiencies that drive real impact. Together, we're going to explore how leaders are navigating AI adoption, from protecting human dignity to reshaping how we work, learn, and lead. So I want to welcome you both to AI Voice of Victim. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I gave my view of Angela Liu and what you do. Can you tell our audience what you do and what you're all about?
Yeah, so I'm basically a fractional COO. So I love working with small businesses, startups, early stage organizations, and nonprofits and helping them grow and scale. Be ready for whatever their shifts are. Make sure that they have the people, processes, and tools in place to make sure that they can deliver on the impact and the missions that they have.
Okay, so just a little background for our audience. You and I used to work together. I don't know how long ago. Do you remember?
Maybe 10 to 15 years ago now.
So over a decade ago, we used to work together at a different consulting company in a completely different industry.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of change has happened over the years. You and I both have kind of centered on AI, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I want to give Tom a little space here to tell us a little bit more about what the hell is a growth architect, Tom?
So a growth architect is designed to help your company grow in terms of ROI and in terms of efficiency in your marketing. So my goal and job is to work with clients to help them through automation processes and also help them streamline how they're working, how they're reaching out to clients, how they're nurturing leads, so that we can help through this whole process of the lead crisis and also attach it to our overall loop strategy.
Okay, you said a lot there. We're gonna break that down a little bit as we go through this. I recently was with both of you in Charlotte at the AI Forward conference, right, which is all about this AI shift, if you will, this transformation that people and organizations are going through today. So first and foremost, can you guys give me just a recap of what you learned? I'll start with you, Angela. What did you see? What did you like? What did you dislike about the conference? Make sure don't forget the dislike part.
Oh, I won't forget that part.
You got to have a hot take.
So it was 2 days, right? The first day, Mark Hinkle just kind of did this whole overview, right? And I'll just say it was really great because it was not overly technical for people who aren't technical with, like, say, a development background, right? But I felt like it really touched on what people needed to genuinely understand in order to lead from the top, like as a CEO, as you're moving through this AI transformation. So with my background as a former software consultant and doing digital implementation through the organizations I've led, right, understanding what the technology is from an architectural standpoint and which defines what its limitations and capabilities are is really important, because then that actually helps you imagine what can it do for this team? How can we actually implement it? And so he did a really great job, I think, of helping bring that level of perspective across a variety of dimensions around AI. So like for anybody who had been new to the space and hadn't really followed it much, I think they would have gotten a huge amount out of it. For me, it was very validating because he shared a lot of perspectives that I was like, yep, I agree. And then the next day, a lot of panels and stuff. Honestly, I really wish that I could have sat on more of them, right? Just the fact that there were 2 panels going on at the same time, I was like, man, I'm missing out on something else that's also really awesome. But one thing that I don't feel like was really there enough, right, was talking about the responsible use of AI, right? So there's ethics, right? But there's also, say, the environmental piece, right? And so there are people out there who are really, really concerned about this, right? And even if some people feel like it's not as big of a deal, they're dismissing it, whatever the case might be, right? There are still people out there who genuinely care and want to make sure that as we're building and scaling this technology, right, we're doing it in a way that makes sense for the future of our society and our planet also, right? There was also, we'll say, like, some people out there who were like, where are the women? Right? Not to say that we didn't have women speakers. We did have some women speakers, of course, right? I think it's, there's definitely also a demographic of people, right, in the space who are like, we want to see more space being made for the women and the tech leaders who are also pushing this forward, right? Because, there are differences in how men and women lead, right? We're capable of the same things, but where we focus and the values that we have sometimes differ, right? And it's not that any is less important than the other. They're both important, right? And we need to be inclusive of that so that what we're creating as a future together is stronger.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. So I appreciate that. You and I had a very similar conversation at a conference, I guess it's been a month ago at this point. I actually had a very spirited debate with Mark Kinkle yesterday for the end of the day yesterday, because we were talking about the next conference and thing that we're going to be doing on December 3rd. But we talked about the other one was the AI State of the Union conference. And I said on stage that same comment, which is there needs to be a much more diverse audience. Right? Women are going to have to be represented and also lean in, right? Because there was a point, and there continues to be a point at which women are adopting at significantly less the rate of men, right? Now, there's already a lot of inherent bias in AI because of history, right? And so for people to see better representation, we do need more folks, one, to create a stage. So credit to Mark, there was, I would say, a significant number of women on stage that were talking, but it was also very notable there was less representation in the audience. One of the things I did think was a kind of a good view was that there was a good number of leaders, right? I've gone to a lot of these conferences and a lot of tinkerers and a lot of people that are trying to build stuff. And I keep calling out the leadership community and say, you have to better understand what's happening right now. And then we'll get back to the responsible use here in a second. But Tom, what are some of your takeaways?
So we were only there the second day. I kind of share the same thing about the panels. There was overlapping times where I was like, gosh, I want to be in both spots to pick through. But for an all things open type of event, I did find it was really encouraging to see that things were covered at a much higher level. If you've been to AI, All Things Open, the AI conference in March, it'll be in Durham again this year. It's very, very technical. And so most of those events are. I sat in one that talked about MCPs, and it was a really well discussed kind of topic in terms of what they do. They showed the flow of how it worked. However, there was one point, and you and I discussed this as well, in that where he said, this is where the poison is. And I kind of cringed at that moment because I went, that's now telling people there's something dangerous. And that's not what you intended to do, but your graphic made it look like as if something very dangerous or scary can happen. And it's not that kind of complex. So I was a little thrown there. I think the other panels, though, to your point, there were great leaders involved. They had one panel that was focused on startups, which really kind of gave me the first feeling in a while at these conferences that somebody was talking about how startups can engage with AI, not these kind of, not bigger companies or this is how Disney uses it or stuff like that, really grounding it down to a very basic level where people can engage and use the products and everything that comes out of AI today. So again, I think in general, really well done, really well covered in terms of some of the topics. Just like anything else, you just want to see more or have more time. That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see this quite a bit, right? I've been to a lot of conferences this year. Tom and I have both been to some conferences this year, and there's just so much excitement and so much energy, but there's also so much overlap. Yeah. And you're like, I want to be in the same, like in two different places at the same time. And I think that's a challenge, but it's also a testament that people want to learn more and they want to understand it. People are trying to pack as much as humanly possible. On the MCP, now was that Don Shin's?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so I was chatting with Don over LinkedIn over the weekend. So I'm going to give Don a chance to come on to the podcast and defend himself and explain what's there. We had a former coworker that said, that commented because Don commented on some post I made, and they said, he's like, man, seeing you and Don know each other. He said, that's like my first time seeing the Avengers come together. I said, as long as I'm Black Panther and not Hawkeye, because I was like, because he's barely a real superhero. I want to go back just for a second on the responsible use, kind of give some a little bit more air to that, because I've heard that a lot, right? I don't think people understand the amount of power and energy that is needed, that is required for AI. It is significant, right? You're talking about, I think at one point they were saying that, I think it was in 2024, that OpenAI used as much energy as the nation of Barbados, right? And I always explain to folks, I'm like, that's at like 5% adoption. And I say this all the time. It's like, what happens when we get to 20% adoption, right? You're literally going to melt the grid, right? Or you're going to get into a situation where it's going to be, like, my view is that we're already kind of racing towards this. There's going to be this have and have nots, right? You're going to have the bigger companies that are buying up all the data centers, all the racks. They're the ones that can build their own, substations and hubs for all these things, right? So my concern is partly, yes, the responsible use and kind of the energy and all the things, affecting the planet. But the other part is also, what happens to the much smaller organizations? How do you compete and survive? So do you have a take on that at all, Angela?
I think I always look at the future as a spectrum of possibilities, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of different ways things can go. And I think the reality is it's going to probably be a mix, right?
Yeah.
Where we're going to have some of the giant conglomerates, and we're still also going to have options for the small businesses, right? I think, as we talk about, say, some of the disparities, right? The technological access disparities that we're worrying about, right? It's going to be a propagation of basically what has been happening over the last few decades as it pertains to computers, internet, things like that, right? When you think about the world and the amount of data that's been digitized and that the AI is being trained on, right? It's predominantly centered around certain languages, certain cultures, certain parts of the world. There are areas of the world that haven't gotten their data digitized. They are not represented in that data. So that's what causes, in my opinion, the inherent bias of AI. It's less of an intentional, we don't want their data, and more just it hasn't gotten digitized, so it's not available to give to the models and such, right? So I think if we want to see better representation across the globe and across different cultures and races and things like that, we'll have to make a much more intentional move to go to these places in the world and say, we want to make sure that your culture, your ways, the knowledge that you have and the information you can share is included, right? Maybe there's a business model in there. I don't know what that is, right? But there's something there, right? Where if we really want to make these models more powerful and less biased, right? Something's going to have to happen to make sure that information's brought in. From an environmental standpoint, my understanding was that it's mostly the training that's draining so much of the resources, but like the prompt in and of itself is pretty much, I think at this point, the equivalent of you put in a Google search, right? So I guess the big question is, how much do we keep training and retraining and doing that big load on these models to make them bigger? And I hear some voices in the community, right, who are talking about small models are actually going to probably be the future, right? If that's the case, maybe it won't be so energy intensive, right? But I don't know. There's still a lot to be worked out in the space, I think.
I think just to tap onto that too, you've got Oracle has announced billion-dollar deals with ChatGPT. I think it was Anthropology yesterday talked about doing a massive deal with AWS. One of our clients, CheckHub, works with Oracle and some of these things, working in terms of how these processes are working, how their teams are managing it. And there's a big talk about dependency on water as well.
Yep.
So electricity is the one part. The water is a significant other part to it. And I think to your point, maybe as we get past some of these large, language learning kind of components and we do all this kind of stuff, we'll be able to move away from them. But there again, does the future of AI become so consumable that all we do is adjust from one pile to another pile, still consume those resources, but now for a different focus? And I don't know that we know that necessarily yet, but it certainly was I had no idea that they took that much kind of resource to do. So it's an interesting take that I think stays to the side. The ethical part floats a little higher, but there's an environmental impact that we're going to have to consider as we continue to develop and grow these things.
Yeah, I think the thing people don't understand, right? So to your point, the training runs are the most power intensive part of this, right? And then the water that you're describing is all about cooling. right? So now the challenge in the US is our infrastructure isn't built in a way where the data centers and things are close to where the actual power is. That's the fundamental problem. We haven't invested in infrastructure in like 70 years. And now that is creating its own set of challenges. So if you think about now, a lot of people are building in Virginia and in rural places in Georgia and Tennessee. That's great, but there's no access to water and energy, right? Now, earlier this year, I remember talking to the team here at Walk West because someone brought this up near the beginning of this year, and they were asking me the same thing. And I said, well, here's the promising thing. So DeepSeek coming out of China, what they proved out was they were able to train on significantly less resources because they kind of flipped the script. They changed, effectively, I'm paraphrasing here, they trained on the top 15% of experts instead of the entire internet. So instead of them having to scrape and leverage all of that. Now, also in China, they've also invested significantly, right, wrong, or indifferent, in how they built infrastructure over the years, right? And so you're hearing a resurgence also of what people would describe as clean nuclear, right, in different ways for getting this energy. It's also what's behind the drive for the U.S. to try to buy Greenland, whatever that means. It's all about energy. People are trying to figure out, how do you create these massive data centers closer to where there's wind, solar, other forms of energy, right? That's what's kind of backing that. And then I agree with you on the small language model side of things, right? You don't need a large language model to solve every single problem. So I was talking to some other folks earlier this year. I do predict that in 2026, you're going to see a big uptick in small language models, open source models that folks are going to start to leverage as they better understand. But it goes back to an earlier comment, which is we need more leaders to lean in. If the leaders don't fundamentally understand that, hey, because all they're hearing is buzzwords. And I talk to people all the time. It's like, well, I think we need a large language model. It's like, not to solve that, you don't, right? And so I think that's part of the challenge. I want to get back to kind of the something that you talk about, Angela, both off camera, and I've seen you at conferences and other places, right? But you talk about protecting the human dignity, right? Can you unpack that for us a little bit more? And how are you describing that?
So there's a lot of excitement and a lot of energy around AI right now, of course, right? And I think the thing that people sometimes forget is this is still digital change management, fundamentally change management at the heart of it, right? And the most challenging part of change management is the people, right? It's about getting people to learn and adopt new ways of doing, right? Learning new tools, new ways of interacting and working together, things like that, right? And there's always some level of resistance that we have to work through, right? And then on the flip side, right, of business, right, we talk about how turnover, right? There's real cost to turnover in a business, right? Whether it's because people left your company or just attrition, people who cycle through, whatever, right? But you got to think about this, I think, from a bigger perspective than just we need AI and we're going to implement it. I think there are unfortunately some leaders who are thinking about things from the framework of, okay, we're going to go AI. So let's just lay off these people. Let's implement a bunch of AI. Let's bring in people who know AI, right? Well, that talent pool is still small because AI is still relatively new. Just like, a few decades ago, computer knowledge was low, right? So it's like, yeah, everybody wants a computer expert, but you're going to just have to homegrown that, right? AI, in my opinion, is really that's where we're at right now. People should be thinking more about homegrowing their AI expertise rather than let's just get rid of these people who are resistant and bring in somebody else, right? Because you're losing the knowledge, the historical knowledge of what's going on in your business, the people who understand your business, what it's about, your customers, how their internal secrets and special secret sauce for your business, right? There's value to that you can't really put a real concrete dollar amount on per se. But when you say goodbye, right, rather than upskilling your people, you're losing that and you're actually slowing down your business's momentum, right? Because let's face it, you bring in somebody new, give them a year before they're actually really adding like something unique to the business, right? So when I talk about human dignity, right, I'm saying, remember that, one, all of us are humans, first and foremost, before anything, any title, any role, our first breath, right? And treat people with respect, right, with dignity, right? Everybody needs to make a living, right? And none of us have all the answers, not even the people at the top, right? Like, let's remember to be humble as leaders, right? And remember, we're figuring it out, and our people are figuring it out too, right? So give people that space to experiment, to explore together. One of the things I thought was really great, another takeaway from the conference at AI Forward was this theme of how learning in community is actually really powerful, especially for this transition, right? Make spaces for people to experiment, to explore, to share what didn't work and share what worked, right? Because that learning, that's where we're going to get really great learning, right? Because Thomas Edison came up with how many ideas before he finally made the light bulb work, right? What doesn't work is just as important as figuring out what works, right? It's that journey that gets there. So human dignity is about making sure you're treating your people with respect, right? And so that's partly, okay, how do we create these intentional spaces so that they can learn, right? Rather than putting all this pressure on, they got to figure it out, right? That they got to do it fast, right? But also remember, you got to bring your people along. As a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure we're thinking about how do we take care of not just this business, but this business includes the team, right? So it's not just the money, it's also the people, because the people are what helps us have the scale and impact that we have and be able to pull in the revenue that we have. So bring in your people, let them learn, right? Treat them with respect. And yes, there's going to be some turnover. I'm very pragmatic, right? So if you're going to do that, treat them with dignity on the way out, right? If for whatever reason you really can't find a way to reskill them and upskill them, right? Treat them with dignity, right? Like the way people have been getting laid off in more recent years, in my opinion, it's a crime. Like, come on, man. Like, at the end of the day, we're all people. Would you want to be treated like that? Like, come on now. That's not a good business.
My whole presentation at the AI4 conference was around AI with the soul. And the whole point was around the human edge, right? And to your point, like you have to treat some folks with dignity for sure, right? Like I've seen a couple of big CEOs, one of the big consulting firms let go of 11,000 people and basically said publicly that because these folks couldn't learn Gen AI, I'm paraphrasing here, but how is that helpful for that individual trying to find their next job? Even if that was the rationale, right, behind it. I think the other part is like, I lead off all of my speaking engagements now with this Upton Sinclair quote from 1934. It's difficult, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it, right? It is very challenging, right? And this is where I put kind of I put a lot of the onus on the leaders. I'm constantly calling these folks out. I'm like, you have to lean in. We always say here at Walk West, you got to make it personal, fun, and safe, right? And those folks would then start to row, with you instead of rowing against you. But I do think that we're going to reach a point, though, where it's going to be very challenging. What I tell people all the time also is that as business leaders, I say, you don't have to worry about AI replacing you. If your company goes out of business, all y'all going to be replaced, right? So there is a fine line where these folks are going to have to figure out this balance. And you're going to see, slowly but surely going into 2026, people are going to move from carrot to stick, right? At some point, and I agree with what you're saying, but at some point, the business is going to take care of the business because I got to take care of the 80, 90% of the people, right? I can't resort to just the 10% that are going to keep pushing back. You wish them well. And to your point, if they need to exit with dignity, right? But it's also very challenging because the market isn't great, right? So you have some people that are just sabotaging the efforts because they can't find a place to go. Yeah. So it's a very challenging time, Tom, what's your thoughts?
So I think two things. One, the community aspect of it. That's such a big part of how those guys put their events together, right? They're different people with different specialties that teach in a panel, then also then provide an outlet to say, I put this up on GitHub for you to use, or I put this on that. Where if you go to a major corporate conference, it's going to be clients or customers that have used it and use it as a pitch and an opportunity to use their platform and do that other stuff. From the ethical side of it, I also think there's a combination. It's leadership, it's comms teams as well, right? So if you look at the Amazon recent layoff, one of the big headlines, it was in LinkedIn News, it was right on the side, was them saying, we're doing this because AI is going to replace these things. No, AI should be something that, individual contributors can help drive and help businesses grow with, not be a replacement tool, not be led as such, because quite frankly, there's not enough data or analysis to say that that's the case. So there are a couple residual roles, maybe. But I'm not even willing to have that conversation yet. To your point, I think it's not ethical. And I think there is a human element to this that we have to be very, very important, very keep in focus about, right? We need to keep that there because the moment we stop doing that, The moment it becomes about machines, the moment this entire AI conversation could go completely to the left, and then it becomes the enemy. And that's not what we want it to become. It's, we talk a lot about here at WalkRest about being a very human-centric experience, right? These things will grow and mature, and companies' processes will get better because the people using those tools will help enable that. But if you don't empower them, if you don't give them that opportunity, and you just say, well, let's just cut bait and plug something in and let it run, I don't see a world where that's going to help you necessarily today in that aspect. And two, to your point, you're going to lose not only just that, but the human, the cultural element of it, the engagement process, that kind of one-to-one thing that is still so important. Web bubbles didn't change that, everything else, like that's still an important element to this. To your point, the market's hard right now, so that makes it a challenging conversation to have. But I think the core reality of it is that while we can continue to grow this and develop it, we have to keep humans in this conversation and not make it about a machine. Yeah. And that's the responsibility of leaders. That's the responsibility of comms teams and major companies, because they're the ones making the biggest noise when they're making these big challenges and decisions. I mean, turn on TikTok now, and there's entire channels devoted to people recording themselves getting laid off, and half the time they're talking about these things and that thing. It's really terrible and hard to watch. So I think we have to keep that in focus. I think it's great that people like you are out there having that conversations. I don't think they're enough. And we need to keep that in focus as we move forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of scapegoating also for AI. Like there's a lot of people that overhired during the pandemic for whatever reason. Yeah, Amazon's one of them. Right? Let's just be clear. They may say AI.
Companies were a lot of them.
Yeah. Right. But there's a lot of people that overhired during the pandemic, thinking that people were never going to go back and talk to humans again or be in rooms as small as this one right here. Right. And I think they're using AI and the narrative to be able to be the scapegoat for bad decisions that were made 2, 3, 4 years ago. So that is also a challenge that is happening, right? And this is probably the first time in my career that I've seen so many knowledge workers, not that we're any better than any other worker, but it's the first time that I've seen people at the director and higher level, knowledge workers. So just to be clear, the Amazon layoffs were primarily affecting corporate knowledge workers. They weren't people in the factories or the drivers, right? And that's the part where people are like, oh, now it's a problem. You were okay when, my family members were getting removed from the factories or these other places, right? And so that is a challenge. But let's bring it back a little bit here, right? Let's talk a little bit about culture. Like, how are you helping workplace culture think about AI? Is that a part of your consulting, or how are you thinking about that?
It's a portion, mainly because I think about the business as a whole, right? So all dimensions of a business. In terms of culture, right, I think having a strong culture of learning, right, and experimentation is really valuable. And so what I'm usually trying to encourage, leaders to think about and encourage in their own teams, right, is get your people to just start experimenting with it, right? And be intentional, right? Think about the ideas of where could you be using this, right? And I think it's really important to give people a certain level of exposure to what it can do before they can start ideating on their own, right? Like you can't just give somebody a tool and say, yeah, see what you can do with this, right? They're probably not going to be sure where to start, right? And they still have metrics and deliverables they need to meet. So, how much time are they going to actually spend tinkering with it, right? And this was something else that I felt like that was a theme at AI Forward, which is, be intentional about your experimentation, your exploration, and your playing around with these tools, right? Because that will actually help you go further. And that was not just on an individual level, but also on a business level, right? So there does need to be a certain amount of training that I think people need to be given to help them learn about what is AI as a technology and what are the possibilities that it can offer, right? Then there's the next level of training, which is, okay, for my role specifically and the responsibilities I have in this organization, how could I use it, right? So it's not so simple as, okay, everybody just start playing around with it. And it's not so simple as, all right, just general AI training, same thing for everybody. No, what a developer needs to know in terms of how they can work with AI is going to be very different from, say, working with somebody who's in marketing, right? Because they're going to be working with these models in very different frameworks, right? The UI is going to be different. What they're asking of it, how they frame their prompts is going to be different. All that kind of stuff, right? So that experimentation piece, that cultural, that community piece, right? Share. I've heard a lot of success coming out of organizations, right, that are creating these sharing communities, right, where it's like, okay, every single week, Somebody's going to share what they've been playing around with in AI, right? What's worked, what didn't work, things like that, right? And so then we're learning from each other and seeing what AI is capable of, right? And that accelerates it, but also helps make positive momentum. Um, and I think it's also really important for people to learn and understand what the limitations of the technology are. I think a lot of people who don't understand that think that, oh, sky's the limit. It can do everything. And it's just like, not really, actually. There are certain things it's good at and certain things it's really not good at. You shouldn't think that it's good at that,
Yeah.
you know?
100%.
So,
It's very polarizing, though,
yeah.
right? You have some camps that believe it can do any and everything, and then you have some folks that say the same thing. They always say, "Oh, it doesn't know how many R's in the strawberry." And I'm like, man, if I have that conversation one more time with someone, but it's that polarizing, right,
Yeah.
on that spectrum. And then also, you have a lot of organizations that historically aren't cultures of innovation,
Mhm.
right? AI affects every single person on the planet, which means it affects every single company. There's a lot of companies out there that innovation is not how you would define them, right? Which is going to make it very challenging. Then there's also the aspect of, like, everybody talked about the MIT report a few months ago about 95% of these pilots fail, and they were taking the wrong pieces from that. It's like, they should fail because you should be experimenting and trying this, right? You know, Tom, you were instrumental in Walk West's journey on getting trained and certified, right? What was that journey like, and what was the what do you view as like the unlock as to why that worked or did not work?
So that journey, as we first started it, we had to think through how are we going to roll this out to the team and what makes the most sense. And as we rolled it out and brought more people into the fold and gamified it and did all this other stuff, it started unlocking a little more interest and opportunity. And what we also did in between is we shared ideas. We did a couple like kind of lunch and learns. We were just sat in a room and talked about what we learned in AI today. And kind of, oh, hey, I use this to try this. You should try that out. We had team members internally, some of our content studios saying, for example, we did this with AI now and check out how cool this is. And I think initially we weren't sure how that was going to be accepted or how that was going to work. And as it grew, the conversations in the hallways and then the conversations in the room, everything else started turning more into, hey, well, I played with AI to try this, or did you try that? Or, hey, I used AI for this and it didn't work, but here's why. Because I think that was another important element of that conversation. It wasn't always about how it worked. It was also about some of the challenges it created. One of our copywriters talked about how it was great in helping certain aspects, but that he was constantly running into M dashes, and how do we get past that? Or there were some hallucinations in a graphic that was created. And so we knew that there's limitations that are still there. But people using the tools and growing with those learned both sides of the coin, and then in return became more engaging as a process. And that really blossomed to a point. I mean, I don't remember how many certifications we got total.
I don't even
It was,
remember at this
it's
point.
in the hundreds.
It's in the hundreds.
Yeah, it's in the hundreds now. But it wasn't just about that anymore. It was about the practical nature that people had learned from using AI and how they could apply it. And that happened in a relatively short window of time because we did it collectively. We made it safe. We made it very approachable. We encouraged whatever you wanted to do. Just have fun with it, figure it out. And that made it so much better than just saying, hey, here's a tool, sit down, come back to me in a week and tell me how this is going to make your job better.
I mean, it was
tough.
again, taking it back to the conference last week, there was a moment I remember being on stage and showing the slide talking about it, and they probably got the most people pulling out their phones and taking pictures of all the slides I showed, right? Like, they wanted to take a picture of it because I think people understand. And I was calling the audience out, and I said the same thing over and over and over again. Stop telling people to just be curious with it. Like, if you want to have you want to see me have an allergic reaction to something, when I see a leader say, "Oh, just be curious and play," I'm like, come on, man. Like, at some point, you got to invest in your team,
Yeah.
right? Or this is going to go nowhere. And I had to invest in myself. I have over 30 GenAI certifications, but the beauty of the competition and what we did, I don't think I was involved in any of it, truthfully, other than just being a player in it. I wasn't at the lunch and learns, any of the sessions, by design, because what I also realized as the CEO of the company, like, if I'm in there, people are going to act and think differently. And I wanted to give people that space. You got to make it personal, fun, and safe. People don't feel safe when the CEO is looking over their shoulder like, that's not how you prompt. Like, don't do that. Like, you're going to get the wrong answer with that. And so you have to figure out, what is your own path. But I'm going to take it back again. It affects every single human on the planet, right? And so I've talked to companies that are in construction, I've talked to folks that are in pro serve. Everybody's trying to figure this out. And there is no one size fits all, right? What you may need it for and what someone else needs it for are maybe radically different here. So we only got a little bit more time here. You talk a lot about ethics and dignity. How are you using AI? I don't think we've ever talked about how you yourself are actually using it.
So I use Claude usually. Partly reason. Okay, so the reason why I chose Claude is because at least my assessment, and reading about the various LLM models, right, is that Anthropic has a stronger commitment to data security and privacy. It also has a stronger commitment to basically making an LLM that doesn't do harm to people. And I appreciate that, right? They may not necessarily have all the shiniest bells and whistles that, say, ChatGPT has come out with, right? But their model still performs and competes from a quality of output and capability and reasoning perspective, right? Just as good as ChatGPT. And sometimes it's even better than ChatGPT's model, right? I mean, sure, ChatGPT 5 just came out, right? But I'm sure Anthropic's model next release going to outperform it again, right? So it's like I don't feel like I'm losing out on the quality of output there, right? It's more just it's going to take them maybe a little catch up to add on the extra bells and whistles that ChatGPT's thought of already, but
I would argue that they actually are not very far behind, and at
yeah.
points they just dropped Claude skills a week or 2 ago,
Yep.
so they're actually ahead in certain areas. A lot of people say that they like Claude because it gets them, right? Like it has a more
Yeah.
friendly interface by design, right? I always try to break down for folks. ChatGPT is a consumer model, right? They're big play. They have 800 million active weekly users, right? Google and Microsoft are leaning to enterprise plays. Claude's play was the ethical choice, right? So in 23, they said, hey, we're not going to be connected to the internet, right? Because we want to be safe. That sounded great until in 24, people got tired of my training run ends in October of 2023. I can't answer that, right? Because at the end of the day, people are looking for answers, right? And not links. Now, what I would also say is that's great marketing and positioning, because their CEO is the main one that goes on the TV shows all the time saying 50% of all workers are going to be replaced in 3 years.
Yeah.
Like they're all playing this game.
Yep.
Right. I'm not saying it's now Anthropic, again, they did come out to try to position as the ethical choice, but they're all within 5% of the same level of capabilities. Claude can create some amazing artifacts if you're trying to vibe code anything. Most of the vibe coding platforms sit on Claude. Right, they're using Claude code predominantly. Now, some of them are starting to use ChatGPT because of GPT-5, right? But even Gemini is an amazing model. So they all have their kind of different slivers of kind of view. Do they have the video generation? No, right? Or the image generation like a ChatGPT or with their Sora, OpenAI Sora 2 is amazing, or VO3
Or
with
not
Google,
open.
right? But I always find it interesting because the Nano Banana for the image generation for Google, which is an amazing product. But all of these, I will say that Claude has continually tried to position themselves that way. But it's a very interesting dynamic because I continue to watch the CMO go on stage in places, right? If you want more people to buy your AI, just say it's going to replace 50% of all workers.
Well, I think he's also trying to raise some flags about, risks, right? There are going to be changes to the workforce, just like computers changed things, right? Like what accountant out there actually manually goes in and does like the manual recordings these days, right? Everybody uses a computer to do these things these days, right? Nobody's doing that math by hand anymore with a calculator, unless they need to audit something maybe. But, like with Claude, right? One of the things I do with Claude, right? So one of the I'll just share another fun story. First time I ever played with an LLM was actually ChatGPT, and I said, "Tell me the top 10 models or top 5 models, AI models, right?" And it lists out whatever. It doesn't mention Claude, and I was just like, "Okay, tell me the top 10." Still no mention of Claude. In fact, it lists one of its older models, maybe once or twice, and I was just like, "What the heck?" And I was like, so I added into the prompt, "Be objective," right? Now Claude showed up, and I was like, "All right, yeah, I'm not going to trust this model." It's clearly got a bias against Claude. It's really weird, And this is, like I said, it was my first time interacting with it, so there shouldn't have been any sort of user history, memory, or whatever stored up, right? So I was just like, that's fine. I'll just work with Claude because I have a friend who's an AI researcher, and he was like, "You should check this out. It's really good stuff," right? So I've been working with Claude. Some of the things that I do with Claude are like, I basically I gave it a lot of history and context about my professional experiences because I actually use it a little bit as a thought partner on some various professional kind of activities, right? So sometimes I'll like maybe draft a post or something, so I'm actually coming up with my own thoughts and stuff, but then I'll be like, all right, help me cut that down, right? But it at least has context about sort of what I'm about, right? Sometimes I've had it help me sort of brainstorm around how could I position around something or if I'm gonna do a talk or something, right? Like, here's some things that I'm thinking about, right? And it's like it might pull some things from my background or whatever also. One of the things I actually did recently was I was on my way back from Asheville and I was like getting an email from somebody about like finding a time. And I was like, my calendar is packed right now. And I don't honestly want to sit on my phone in the car and look through my calendar and find what few pockets are left, right? I was like, man, if this kind of keeps happening. So it'd be great if I could just have Claude just tell me what are my windows, right? And I was like, well, we got the MCP for the calendar. So I was like, all right. So I literally spent like the 4-hour drive back because I was a passenger. Spent this 4-hour drive.
Important caveat. There.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here, I'm like talking with Claude, and I'm like, all right, I want you to look at my calendar. I want you to tell me these windows of availability, whatever stuff, right? And going back and forth, whatever, right? And trying to refine its behavior and its output and stuff like that, trying to make sure it has the context it needs to understand how I want it to evaluate what it does see on my calendar. Because there are things where some of them are out of offices, some of them are buffer times, some of them are actual work things, some of them are events, whatever, right? There's a lot of things there. And got it to a point where I kind of describe it as I got it to like 95%, right? There's like this one thing where every now and then it's like 15 minutes off on something. And I'm just like, all right, that's close enough. Like I could probably play around with it more and get it to 100%, but it's like, it's Pareto rule at this point. It's probably not worth the time, right?
80-20.
Yeah, it's the 80-20 rule. Yeah. So it's just like, so yeah. So one of my ideas that I haven't had the time yet, but when Claude skills came out, I was just like, oh, I want to take that and I want to see if it'll do better with Claude skills or if maybe it'll just perform the same anyway, right? But let's see how quickly it translates.
The irony is that we continually hold technology to a much higher bar than we hold humans, right? So Claude is wrong 5% of the time. It's like, what the F, man? Like, are you serious? It's like, although my own admin, who I love and I've worked with forever, may be wrong 10 to 15% of the time, right? It's like, hey, man, I'm double booked, right? In a very bad way, right? But that's, it's the nature kind of where we are. But I do think we're crossing that chasm, right, where people are starting to also like take its advice a little bit more than probably we should or not. But the other irony, we didn't talk about this earlier about when we're talking about responsible use and power. And I tell people all the time, AI may be the only thing that we have that helps us solve the energy crisis, right?
I've heard that.
It may be the only thing we have to solve and create the cure for cancer, right? So as much as people say, well, I don't like this and this, I'm like, well, do you like this thing worse? Right? Because at point, everything in society becomes a trade-off at some point, right? And you have to think in that way. Well, you just teed us up for our favorite part of the show, which is we call Last Chat. So you're going to have to bring out your phone. Like, I'm very scared to see what Tom is going to have in his last chat and what he's going to show.
It says something about Greg.
I mean, it probably is like, hey, how can I dress like this dude? And you probably took a picture of me, put it in there.
It was a killer costume. It was really.
He had a killer Halloween costume. So we're gonna play a little segment we call Last Chat. So Angela, we can start with you, or we want to start with Tom.
Let's start with Tom.
And it could be Claude. We just call it Last Chat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I did it. So I agree with you, by the way, on Claude. But I did pull ChatGPT for this one. Yesterday, user journey personas was what I was using it for. We have a client that we're developing a new site for, and we're working through the menu process. And so I asked ChatGPT to analyze the current site, its mega menus and how it works and what that user journey might look like so that we can do two things. One, identify where there's too much friction and help us then model or architect how the new menu and mega menus will work so that there's a cleaner path to what the person is actually looking for, right? People show up now 60% more educated about you than they did 5 years ago. It used to be like 30%. So you want to give them a clear path. So this user journey mapping allowed me to start understanding better so that we can apply it to the future state of what their site would be.
Nice.
Angela?
Well, I'll be honest, my last chat was about me. I was actually talking with Claude
Whatever you're comfortable
about no, it's
sharing to the three viewers that we have for me.
too funny.
So
No, it was actually I was actually brainstorming with it this weekend on clarifying a talk overview. So I was just like, okay, here's what I want to talk about, but I need this to fit in three sentences, and I'm not exactly the most succinct speaker. I'm actually very verbose naturally. So, and this is usually how I partner with with Claude actually is like, help me cut this down and without losing like the essence of what I'm trying to say and without losing my voice. So yeah, it's basically like, all right, here's what I want to talk about. Help me get a good title. Give me some ideas. All right, cool. And give me some suggestions on how I can frame this overview. And went through this iterative process and stuff. Like for me, it's always an iterative process. I'm like, all right, well, I like some of these things and I like some of those things, and it's like, all right, smash that together. And then I look at that and I'm like, I don't really like this part. What are some options here or whatever like that, right? So, I mean, I just use it as a thought partner for wording because I can be very particular about my wording and it'll take me a while to come up with it on my own. But I do find that if I'm working with Claude and it's spitting out some different things, sometimes I'm like, all right, I like that wording. I feel like I can get there a little bit faster. And sometimes it gives like some alternatives that I probably wouldn't have come up with. But one thing that I don't think any of these AI models will ever do is make up words, because I definitely make up words.
you see, you're like me, right? I use it as a thought partner because I need something that hallucinates less than me, right?
Well, I don't know about that one.
Right?
It's like, all right, this person, at least this thing stays on track more than I do. I was having a moment where I kept seeing all these. I was having a very jealous moment where I kept looking at all these people with these beautiful keynotes and all these presentations, and I was trying to figure out how the hell to make Canva. I was like, how do I use Canva to make my keynote right look like this thing, right, versus how I typically present. And I'm not going to go through the back and forth because there's a lot of back and forth that we were having. I was starting to get very frustrated, and then at some point I was just simply like, how do I just give Canva my colors and fonts to use, right? Like I didn't understand what was happening. And then it finally figured out later through our whole dialogue that, you want to use Canva's AI features. I was trying to use the old kind of version to do all these things and I could not figure it out. I was like, I'm certain I could just give this thing. And then I finally scrolled down the left-hand side of it. He's like, click on this thing here. And it was like Canva AI. I was like, oh. I'm the dumbass. my
Classic
bad.
example.
My bad,
Not
chat.
knowing how to use technology.
Cool.
Right?
Missed that product up there.
So, no, but I appreciate the time with both of you guys. I enjoyed when we were in Charlotte, right, and talking about it. And every time I run into Angela, a month ago, I ran into Angela at the conference and I saw her in the back and I called her out. Like she made me stop. I was like, oh, Angela's here. She's in the back, right? She's seen me rant on stage enough and we used to work together quite a bit. And now I get to work with Tom. He didn't replace you, Angela, right? It's just a different.
He's cool. I like him. Yeah. I'd work with him too.
So she implied that I wasn't cool. I don't know. But,
No, you're cool too, man.
No, it's all right. So that's a wrap. So I appreciate the time today.
Thanks for joining us on AI, Voice or Victim. If you want to stay competitive in the AI age, start now. Take one insight from today's episode and put it into practice in the next 24 hours. Make sure to follow us, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more actionable AI insights. See you next time.